But then, something catches your eye. You stop, your thumb hovering over the screen. It's a live stream. Not just any live stream, though. It's a face you recognize. A face you haven't seen in years. A face you've been wondering about for weeks. It's your childhood friend, your best friend, someone you lost contact with years ago. But here's the thing, she's supposed to be missing. The police have been searching for her. Her family's been frantic, posting missing person flyers everywhere. And there she is, alive and well, in a TikTok live stream. Your heart races, your mind starts to spiral. You want to scream, but you can't. You watch in shock, unable to move, as she chats casually in the stream, completely unaware of the chaos she's about to stir. How is this even possible? How can she be alive and well when just days ago, the entire town was searching for her? Stay with me, because what happens next is going to blow your mind. In this video, we're going to dive into one of the most bizarre, confusing, and chilling mysteries ever to surface on TikTok. Trust me, you won't want to miss a second of this. If you've ever scrolled through social media and wondered whether what you're seeing is real or fake, you'll want to stay tuned because this story is going to take you places you never saw coming. You're about to uncover the shocking truth behind this case, so stick with me till the end, and I promise, the mystery will unfold right before your eyes. But here's where it gets even stranger. The TikTok livestream isn't the only clue that raises questions. You see, before this livestream, there was nothing, no updates, no word from her, nothing. Her family had been frantic, posting tearful updates, begging for anyone with information to come forward. The police were involved, and yet, there was no sign of her. The investigation was going cold, and hope was running out. Then, out of nowhere, she appears on TikTok, live for the entire world to see, like nothing ever happened. But the question remains, where has she been all this time? You might be thinking, maybe it's a mistake. Maybe it's someone who looks like her. Trust me, I had the same thoughts when I first saw it. But the more I looked into it, the more it felt like something was off. The way she smiled, the way she talked, the little details that only you would know if you spent years of your childhood with someone, this was definitely her. So, what's going on? Where has she been for weeks, and why hasn't anyone heard from her before now? Let's rewind for a second, because the story goes back much further than this TikTok live stream. 4 years, the town had been buzzing with the mystery of her disappearance. Her family was devastated, and her friends, like me, were desperate for answers. I remember the day she went missing like it was yesterday. The whole town was on edge, whispering about it. I couldn't sleep, thinking about her and wondering if she was okay. Was she lost? Was she in danger? We all thought the worst, but no one could have prepared us for what was coming. And now, here she is, in a live stream, as if nothing ever happened. But wait, it gets even more mysterious. The deeper I dug, the more strange things I discovered about this situation. TikTok users have begun to piece together clues, some pointing to something even darker lurking beneath the surface. Is this a cry for help? Or is there something more sinister going on? What if her sudden appearance wasn't by chance? Could she be trying to communicate something to us all through her live stream? And what happens when the truth behind her disappearance finally comes to light? By now, you must be asking, what is going on? Who's behind this? And what does it all mean? Don't worry, because we're about to uncover everything. I'm going to walk you through the twists, the turns, and the bizarre moments that led up to this discovery. The mystery of her disappearance is far from over, and in this video, I'll break down everything we know so far. But before we continue, I want to remind you that this story isn't just about a missing person. It's about the power of social media, the way it can shape our perception of reality, and how sometimes, the answers we seek might be right under our noses. This story is a perfect example of how TikTok and platforms like it can bring people together, help solve mysteries, or sometimes make things even more complicated than they were to begin with. So, I want you to think about this as we move forward. How much can you trust what you see online? How often do you scroll past something without thinking twice about its authenticity? What if the truth isn't as simple as it seems? Stick with me through this entire video because we're about to answer those questions and so much more. You'll see the live stream footage, hear the chilling details, and get the answers that you've been waiting for. But just before we dive deeper into this wild mystery, let's take a moment to remember who we're talking about here, her. The girl who was once your best friend, the one you spent countless hours with as a child, the one you shared secrets with, laughed with, and dreamed with. She wasn't just anyone, she was someone you thought you'd lost forever. And now, the question remains, what happened to her? Is she in danger, or has she been hiding something all along? I'm about to take you behind the scenes and unravel everything. But there's one thing I need you to do right now, don't skip ahead. I know it's tempting, but trust me when I say you'll want to experience every twist, every revelation, as it happens. You're on the edge of discovering something so big, it might change everything you thought you knew about this case. Stay with me, and I'll show you what's really going on. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why this mystery is one of the most mind-blowing stories ever to surface on TikTok. Are you ready for the truth? Let's go. As we begin to peel back the layers of this bizarre mystery, we have to start by asking the most basic question: who was she really? Who was this girl that we all knew, but never truly understood? Her name was Jessica, and to anyone who knew her growing up, she was always the quiet one, the type of person who didn't seek attention but somehow always ended up at the center of it. When we were kids, Jessica had this way of blending into the background while still being part of everything. She was the friend who always had your back when you needed someone, the one who never really stood out in a crowd, but who you knew would never let you down. She was the type of person you could call at 2 a.m., and she'd answer, no questions asked. We all thought we knew her. And yet, none of us could have predicted what would happen just a few months ago. The last time I saw Jessica, it was a regular Thursday night, the kind of night where everything feels normal and nothing seems out of place. We were at the local diner, just like old times, catching up on life. At that point, she was a little different. There was a heaviness in her eyes, a sense that something was off, but she never said a word about it. She smiled, laughed at my jokes, and pretended everything was okay, but I could tell she wasn't the same person she used to be. I tried to ask her about it, about what was going on in her life, but she just changed the subject, deflecting with a smile and a wave. Looking back, I should have pressed harder, I should have dug deeper into what was going on in her life, but I didn't. There were whispers of a secret group she might have been involved with, something that went beyond the quiet, small-town life she'd always known. Some people claimed that Jessica had been involved in underground activities, things that were too risky for most people to even think about, let alone get involved in. But I couldn't verify any of it. Every lead felt like it was just another dead end, and every person I spoke to seemed more and more nervous about the subject. Something didn't add up, and I knew I was getting too close to the truth for someone's comfort. And then, just as I was starting to piece things together, a new, unexpected obstacle appeared. A message from Jessica herself. It was a voice message, sent from an unknown number, one that I didn't recognize. Her voice was unmistakable, but it was distant, almost hollow, as if she were speaking from far away. The message was short, just a few words, but it sent a cold shiver down my spine. Don't trust Mark. That was all. Just those 4 words. Don't trust Mark. Was she trying to warn me about him? Or was it a message meant to confuse me, to throw me off track? The more I thought about it, the more uncertain I became. Had I been wrong about Mark all along? Was he really the friend he appeared to be, or was he hiding something much darker? And what if Jessica had been trying to reach out all along, but I just hadn't been listening? Was the key to this entire mystery right under my nose the whole time, and I'd been too blind to see it? Now, with the stakes higher than ever, I'm at a crossroads. Every answer I think I have only leads to more questions. Every person I trust could be hiding something. Every clue I uncover seems to lead to a dead end, or worse, to more confusion. And with Jessica's warning echoing in my mind, I can't help but wonder, am I really getting closer to the truth, or am I about to stumble into something far worse than I ever imagined? What happens next? You'll have to stay tuned to find out, because the twists and turns are far from over, and the truth is still waiting to be uncovered. Just when I thought things couldn't get any more complicated, the situation took a turn that made me question everything. The message from Jessica, the cryptic "Don't trust Mark," was still playing over and over in my mind, gnawing at me like a bad itch. I had already started to feel the weight of the investigation pressing down on me, And now, this warning made me wonder if I had been completely wrong about who was trustworthy. But it wasn't just me who was feeling the heat. Someone else close to me began to feel the same ominous shift in the air, and it made everything feel even more real, even more dangerous. It started with my cousin, Sarah. She had been one of the few people I confided in about the whole Jessica situation. She'd always been sharp, analytical, the kind of person who could read between the lines in a way I often couldn't. Sarah had been following the case from the sidelines, watching my every move, and even though I hadn't asked her to, she'd started digging into things on her own. It was her idea to check out the backstories of some of Jessica's old friends, especially Mark, who she believed had a weird vibe about him. I didn't think much of it at the time, but a few days after I received that voice message from Jessica, Sarah called me late one night. There was an urgency in her voice, something I couldn't ignore. "I think you're going to want to hear this," she said, barely letting me get a word in before continuing. "I got a message too. From the same number that sent you Jessica's warning." My heart skipped a beat. It was as if the floor dropped out beneath me. "What did it say?" I asked, though I wasn't sure if I was ready for the answer. Sarah paused for a moment, and when she spoke again, her words came out strained. "It said, you're too close. Stop digging, or you'll end up just like her." I could hear the shakiness in her voice, and I immediately felt the tension creep into my own chest. The fact that Sarah had received a warning too didn't just confirm that someone was actively trying to shut us down, it suggested that this wasn't just about Jessica anymore. Whoever was behind this knew we were on the brink of uncovering something huge, something that could blow the whole thing wide open. They were willing to threaten not just me, but also my own family. But the worst part, I didn't know who they were. Who had the power to monitor our every move, to intercept our messages, to know exactly what we were looking into? Who had the motivation to keep Jessica's disappearance wrapped in so much secrecy? I started to feel like we were being followed, like there was someone just one step behind us, always watching, always listening. It was a feeling I couldn't shake, and it kept me up at night, wondering if I had already made a mistake by digging into something so dangerous. But how could I stop now, after everything I had learned? Sarah's message only complicated things further. It was as if we were trapped in a game where the rules were constantly changing, and every time we thought we had a lead, it slipped out of our hands like sand through our fingers. But it didn't stop there. The very next morning, I received another unexpected twist, a new piece of evidence that threatened to undo everything I thought I knew. It was an old, faded police report, one that had been buried deep in the archives. I wasn't even sure how it came into my hands. Someone must have slipped it under my door, or maybe it had been sent by someone who wanted me to find it. Either way, it was a report detailing Jessica's original disappearance, but it wasn't anything like the version I had heard before. According to this new document, Jessica hadn't just disappeared without a trace. The report mentioned an incident that had occurred a few weeks before she went missing, one that had been expedited by the authorities and kept under wraps. No one had ever mentioned this before, not the police, not her family, and definitely not the media. This wasn't just a case of someone walking away or getting lost. There had been a reason she vanished, something much darker and far more sinister than anyone had let on. But the most chilling part was the name listed in the report under suspected individuals. Mark's name. It was there, in black and white, as a person of interest. My stomach churned as I stared at the paper, the implications of it hitting me like a ton of bricks. Had I really been that blind? Was Mark involved in this from the beginning? And if so, how deep did his connection to Jessica go? I tried to make sense of it all. Could the message Sarah received be connected to this report? Was someone trying to scare us off the trail by threatening us, or was this warning part of a larger, coordinated effort to cover up what had really happened to Jessica? I wasn't sure anymore. The more I learned, the more confused I became. It was like I was drowning in a sea of half-truths and missing pieces, and every time I thought I was close to finding something concrete, it was just another dead end or a shadowy figure lurking in the background, pushing me further from the truth. I needed answers, but the closer I got, the more it felt like someone was always one step ahead, pulling the strings, making sure I couldn't get too close to the heart of the mystery. And then, just when I thought I couldn't handle any more, I received another message, this time, from an unknown number. The text was short, almost mocking in its simplicity. "You're on the right track, but don't think you're the only one looking for her." It sent a wave of dread through me. Was someone else investigating Jessica's disappearance too? Someone with more power, more resources than I had? And if so, who were they, and what were they really after? With every passing day, the lines between friend and foe blurred further. Mark, Sarah, and even Jessica, could I trust any of them? I didn't know. The deeper I dug, the more I realized that this wasn't just about finding Jessica. It was about uncovering a truth that someone, or some group, was willing to do anything to keep hidden. The stakes had never been higher. But as I stared at that last cryptic message on my phone, one thought echoed through my mind: what if the truth is far worse than anything I could ever imagine? The further I went, the more it felt like I was stepping into a nightmare that had no clear end. The only thing I knew for sure was that I was no longer just looking for Jessica, I was looking for something far more dangerous, something I might not be able to escape once I found it. The game had changed, and there was no turning back now. As the days dragged on, I began to feel a shift in the air, a tightening grip of unease that seemed to pulse around me like a warning, something that couldn't be ignored. The further I got into this investigation, the more I realized I wasn't just chasing a missing persons case, I was chasing a nightmare. A nightmare that was slowly bleeding into my own life, poisoning my every step, and it was only a matter of time before I was pulled into the darkness myself. What had started as a simple attempt to find Jessica had turned into something far more dangerous. The first real sign that something had gone terribly wrong came late one night. I had just wrapped up a phone call with Sarah, discussing the new evidence I had uncovered, the strange police report, the cryptic warnings, and we were both starting to feel the weight of this case bearing down on us. We talked about meeting up the next day to compare notes, but something about that night felt different. A sense of dread settled over me as I hung up. It wasn't just the investigation that was keeping me up, it was everything that had been happening lately. The strange messages, the disappearances, the paranoia creeping into my every thought. But I pushed it all aside, telling myself it was just stress. I was overthinking things. That night, after I had turned off the lights and lay there in bed, staring up at the ceiling, a sound broke through the silence. It was a soft tapping, barely audible at first, coming from the window. I sat up, heart racing, straining my ears to listen. The tapping grew louder, more insistent. Someone was out there. For a moment, I just froze, every muscle in my body tense, every instinct screaming at me to run, to hide. But I didn't. I couldn't. I stood up and moved cautiously toward the window, my mind swirling with thoughts. Could it be someone who had followed me? Was it a neighbor? Was it Mark, or someone else trying to warn me, or worse, threaten me? My hand trembled as I pulled the blinds open, but when I looked out, there was nothing. The street was dark, empty, silent. My breath came out in a sharp exhale of relief, but something still didn't feel right. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been there, watching me, waiting for me to make a move. The next day, when I went out to meet Sarah, I couldn't shake that nagging sense of unease. Something was off. I had planned to meet her at the same coffee shop we always met at, but when I arrived, she wasn't there. At first, I thought she was just running late, but as the minutes ticked by, something inside me began to twist with anxiety. I texted her. No response. I called. Straight to voicemail. My heart pounded in my chest as the seconds dragged into minutes, and then into an hour. Sarah was never late. She never left me hanging like this, especially not after everything we had been through together. I tried calling again, and again, but still nothing. Panic started to set in as the realization dawned on me: Sarah was gone. I felt the world tilt beneath me, as though the ground was no longer solid, and I was sinking into an abyss I couldn't escape. Was it connected to the investigation? Was it a coincidence, or had someone taken her? The thought of her being dragged into this web of lies and secrets, the same way Jessica had been, made my stomach churn. I rushed to her apartment, but when I got there, it was empty. No signs of a struggle, no broken windows, no indication that anyone had forced their way in. It was as if she had just vanished into thin air, just like Jessica. There was nothing. Only a deafening silence that seemed to echo in my ears. I felt the weight of it then, the weight of my own involvement in something I hadn't fully understood. This was no longer just a search for answers about Jessica. This was something bigger, something darker, and it was pulling everyone around me into its grasp. I had to keep moving. I had to find Sarah. But every step I took felt like I was sinking deeper into the very mystery I was trying to solve. Every corner I turned felt like it could be the last one, the point of no return. As I was pacing through her apartment, trying to gather some clue, something caught my eye, a piece of paper half hidden underneath a pile of old magazines. It was a note, hastily scribbled on a scrap of napkin, and when I read it, the blood drained from my face. The words were simple, but the message was clear: I'm not safe. It's too late. They're watching us. Don't trust anyone. Please. The words were written in a hurry, the handwriting shaky and uneven, as though whoever had written it had been under extreme pressure. My mind raced. Was this Sarah's message to me? Or was it someone else's warning? Had she been involved in something she hadn't told me about, something even darker than what we'd already uncovered? The reality of the situation hit me hard. Whoever was behind Jessica's disappearance was also pulling the strings in Sarah's life, and now they were making it clear that I wasn't safe either. My phone buzzed, interrupting my thoughts. It was another anonymous message, this time more direct than before. The message read, "You're next." The words seemed to burn into my mind as I stared at the screen, feeling the weight of the threat settle over me like a shroud. My pulse quickened as I looked around the empty apartment, every creak of the floorboards making me jump. It felt like the walls were closing in, and I couldn't breathe. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know who to trust anymore. There was no one left to confide in, no one left to turn to. Mark. Sarah. The authorities. Everyone seemed to be a potential enemy, and the deeper I dug, the more dangerous it became. They were always one step ahead, always watching, always waiting for me to slip up. I started to feel the full weight of the danger pressing in on me. The paranoia was suffocating, the fear consuming. Everywhere I went, I felt eyes on me, lurking just out of view. You're on the right track, but don't think you're the only one looking for her. It sent a wave of dread through me. Was someone else investigating Jessica's disappearance too? Someone with more power, more resources than I had? And if so, who were they, and what were they really after? With every passing day, the lines between friend and foe blurred further. Mark, Sarah, and even Jessica, could I trust any of them? I didn't know. The deeper I dug, the more I realized that this wasn't just about finding Jessica. It was about uncovering a truth that someone, or some group, was willing to do anything to keep hidden. The stakes had never been higher. But as I stared at that last cryptic message on my phone, one thought echoed through my mind: what if the truth is far worse than anything I could ever imagine? The further I went, the more it felt like I was stepping into a nightmare that had no clear end. The only thing I knew for sure was that I was no longer just looking for Jessica, I was looking for something far more dangerous, something I might not be able to escape once I found it. The game had changed, and there was no turning back now. As the days dragged on, I began to feel a shift in the air, a tightening grip of unease that seemed to pulse around me like a warning, something that couldn't be ignored. The further I got into this investigation, the more I realized I wasn't just chasing a missing persons case, I was chasing a nightmare. A nightmare that was slowly bleeding into my own life, poisoning my every step, and it was only a matter of time before I was pulled into the darkness myself. What had started as a simple attempt to find Jessica had turned into something far more dangerous. The first real sign that something had gone terribly wrong came late one night. I had just wrapped up a phone call with Sarah, discussing the new evidence I had uncovered, the strange police report, the cryptic warnings, and we were both starting to feel the weight of this case bearing down on us. We talked about meeting up the next day to compare notes, but something about that night felt different. A sense of dread settled over me as I hung up. It wasn't just the investigation that was keeping me up, it was everything that had been happening lately. The strange messages, the disappearances, the paranoia creeping into my every thought. But I pushed it all aside, telling myself it was just stress. I was overthinking things. That night, after I had turned off the lights and lay there in bed, staring up at the ceiling, a sound broke through the silence. It was a soft tapping, barely audible at first, coming from the window. I sat up, heart racing, straining my ears to listen. The tapping grew louder, more insistent. Someone was out there. For a moment, I just froze, every muscle in my body tense, every instinct screaming at me to run, to hide. But I didn't. I couldn't. I stood up and moved cautiously toward the window, my mind swirling with thoughts. Could it be someone who had followed me? Was it a neighbor? Was it Mark, or someone else trying to warn me, or worse, threaten me? My hand trembled as I pulled the blinds open, but when I looked out, there was nothing. The street was dark, empty, silent. My breath came out in a sharp exhale of relief, but something still didn't feel right. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been there, watching me, waiting for me to make a move. The next day, when I went out to meet Sarah, I couldn't shake that nagging sense of unease. Something was off. I had planned to meet her at the same coffee shop we always met at, but when I arrived, she wasn't there. At first, I thought she was just running late, but as the minutes ticked by, something inside me began to twist with anxiety. I texted her. No response. I called. Straight to voicemail. My heart pounded in my chest as the seconds dragged into minutes, and then into an hour. Sarah was never late. She never left me hanging like this, especially not after everything we had been through together. I tried calling again, and again, but still nothing. Panic started to set in as the realization dawned on me. Sarah was gone. I felt the world tilt beneath me, as though the ground was no longer solid, and I was sinking into an abyss I couldn't escape. Was it connected to the investigation? Was it a coincidence, or had someone taken her? The thought of her being dragged into this web of lies and secrets, the same way Jessica had been, made my stomach churn. I rushed to her apartment, but when I got there, it was empty. No signs of a struggle, no broken windows, no indication that anyone had forced their way in. It was as if she had just vanished into thin air, just like Jessica. There was nothing. Only a deafening silence that seemed to echo in my ears. I felt the weight of it then, the weight of my own involvement in something I hadn't fully understood. This was no longer just a search for answers about Jessica. This was something bigger, something darker, and it was pulling everyone around me into its grasp. I had to keep moving. I had to find Sarah. But every step I took felt like I was sinking deeper into the very mystery I was trying to solve. Every corner I turned felt like it could be the last one, the point of no return. As I was pacing through her apartment, trying to gather some clue, something caught my eye, a piece of paper half hidden underneath a pile of old magazines. It was a note, hastily scribbled on a scrap of napkin, and when I read it, the blood drained from my face. The words were simple, but the message was clear. I'm not safe. It's too late. They're watching us. Don't trust anyone. Please. The words were written in a hurry, the handwriting shaky and uneven, as though whoever had written it had been under extreme pressure. My mind raced. Was this Sarah's message to me? Or was it someone else's warning? Had she been involved in something she hadn't told me about, something even darker than what we'd already uncovered? The reality of the situation hit me hard. Whoever was behind Jessica's disappearance was also pulling the strings in Sarah's life, and now they were making it clear that I wasn't safe either. My phone buzzed, interrupting my thoughts. It was another anonymous message, this time more direct than before. The message read, "You're next." The words seemed to burn into my mind as I stared at the screen, feeling the weight of the threat settle over me like a shroud. My pulse quickened as I looked around the empty apartment, every creak of the floorboards making me jump. It felt like the walls were closing in, and I couldn't breathe. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know who to trust anymore. There was no one left to confide in, no one left to turn to. Mark. Sarah. The authorities. Everyone seemed to be a potential enemy, and the deeper I dug, the more dangerous it became. They were always one step ahead, always watching, always waiting for me to slip up. I started to feel the full weight of the danger pressing in on me. The paranoia was suffocating, the fear consuming. Everywhere I went, I felt eyes on me, lurking just out of view. Every car that passed by, every shadow in the corner of my eye, every phone call that came through, I couldn't trust anything, anyone. I didn't even know who was on the other end of the line anymore. Was it Jessica? Was it Sarah? Or was it someone else, pulling the strings from behind the scenes, orchestrating this entire nightmare for their own twisted purposes. I tried to leave the apartment, to get some air, but the second I stepped outside, I saw a figure standing at the far end of the street, watching me from a distance. I couldn't make out their face, but I could feel their gaze burning into me, the unmistakable sense that they were waiting for me to make a move. I froze, my heart thumping in my chest. And just as quickly as they appeared, the figure turned and disappeared into the night. I didn't know if it was a warning, a threat, or just my mind playing tricks on me, but one thing was clear: I was in deep now, deeper than I'd ever expected to go. The game had changed, and the rules no longer made sense. It was no longer just about Jessica, or Sarah, it was about survival. I had no idea who was behind all of this, but I knew one thing for sure: I had to keep moving, keep digging, keep fighting for the truth. Because if I stopped now, if I let this thing swallow me whole, I might never get out again. Just when I thought I was getting closer to unraveling the mystery, the world I thought I knew began to shift under my feet. The pieces I had carefully gathered, the leads I had followed, all seemed to crumble in an instant when the truth came crashing down. Everything I believed was wrong, and it wasn't until a single conversation that I realized how completely I had been deceived. It started when I received a call from Mark, of all people. I hadn't heard from him in days, and honestly, I wasn't sure if I even wanted to talk to him. I had my suspicions about him. He'd always seemed a little off, too secretive, too distant, and now, with Sarah gone and everything falling apart, I wasn't sure if he was part of the problem or just another victim caught up in the mess. But when he called, his voice was different, urgent, almost panicked. "I need to see you," he said, his voice shaky. "It's about Jessica. There's something you need to know." At that moment, I didn't even question it. The desperation in his voice made me believe he had information, something important. It was stupid of me to trust him, but I did. I rushed to the location he suggested, a secluded park on the edge of town, a place we used to hang out as kids. It felt nostalgic, but there was nothing comforting about it now. When I arrived, I found Mark sitting on a bench, looking more like a shell of the person I'd known. He was hunched over, his hands trembling, and the moment I sat down next to him, he blurted out something I wasn't prepared to hear. "I've been lying to you," he said, his eyes darting nervously around. "About everything." The words hung in the air, thick with tension. I didn't know how to respond, but I could feel my heart rate quicken. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I was trying to keep my composure, but the weight of everything that had been happening was starting to crash over me like a tidal wave. I needed answers. Mark's eyes were wide with fear now, and I could see that whatever he was about to say, it would change everything. "Jessica didn't just go missing," he said, and my stomach dropped. "She's not missing at all. She's been hiding. She wanted to disappear." I felt my world spin. "What are you talking about? Why would she do that?" I asked, completely confused. Mark hesitated, looking down at his hands before meeting my gaze. "Because she had to. Because she found out something she wasn't supposed to know, and she was scared. But there's more. Someone close to you, has been working with her all along." My head was spinning. "What are you saying? Who's working with her?" My voice was shaking, but I was desperate to understand. "Who's behind all this?" Mark took a deep breath, then looked at me, his face pale. "Sarah. She knew everything. She's been helping Jessica for months. And she's been lying to you. She's the reason you've been getting those messages." The ground seemed to shift beneath me. I couldn't process what he was saying. Sarah, my cousin, the one person I thought I could trust, had been involved in all of this. But why? Why would she do that? The betrayal stung, but it also raised a dozen questions I hadn't even considered. Mark continued, "Sarah and Jessica were trying to expose something. Something big. Something that involved people who would do anything to keep it hidden. They were going to expose it all until Jessica panicked and decided to disappear." I couldn't make sense of it. The puzzle pieces that had once seemed so clear were now scattered and twisted into something unrecognizable. What were they trying to expose? "What's this all about, Mark? What's the truth?" Mark lowered his voice, almost as if he were afraid someone might overhear. "It's bigger than you think. The people who are behind this, they're powerful. They've been controlling things for years, and Jessica found something that threatened to bring it all crashing down. But now she's gone, and Sarah's the one who's been keeping it all under wraps, trying to protect you from getting involved. It was as if the world had flipped upside down. Everything I had thought was part of one investigation, one search for a missing person, was now just a tiny fraction of something much darker and much more dangerous. Sarah had been involved from the start, and so had Mark. But why had he waited so long to tell me? Why hadn't he said anything sooner? Was he protecting Sarah, or was he trying to cover his own tracks? Suddenly, everything I had seen through the lens of a simple mystery, the missing friend, the cryptic messages, the threats, the investigation, was all tainted. The world I had been living in was a lie, a web of deceit so tangled I couldn't tell who was pulling the strings. Was Sarah really trying to protect me, or had she been playing me all along? Had Mark been trying to hide something, or was he part of the conspiracy from the very beginning? And what had Jessica truly discovered? What was so important that it had caused her to run, to hide, and to leave me and everyone else searching for answers? I needed to find out, but now, the more I uncovered, the more I realized that every step forward only brought me closer to an abyss, an endless darkness where no one was safe. I was tangled in something so far beyond what I had imagined, so far beyond what I had been prepared for. The closer I got to the truth, the more dangerous it became. The question wasn't whether I would find Jessica anymore, it was whether I could survive long enough to uncover the truth behind her disappearance, and Sarah's role in it. Because I knew one thing for sure now, the people behind all of this would stop at nothing to make sure their secrets remained hidden, and I was getting too close to unmasking them. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was on the edge of something much larger than myself, something that had already ensnared people I cared about, people I thought I could trust. The web was tightening around me, and I was starting to understand that no matter how much I dug, I was only uncovering more layers of deceit, more lies, and ultimately, the bitter truth that I was in deeper than I ever realized. But the hardest part came when the choice, the real test, was laid bare before me. It wasn't about finding the truth anymore, it was about surviving it. The days that followed that confrontation with Mark were a blur of confusion and dread. I couldn't stop thinking about what he had told me, Sarah's involvement, Jessica's secrets, the mysterious people who were pulling the strings. The more I thought about it, the more I realized just how little I actually knew about the people around me. Mark had told me about Sarah's betrayal, but now, I was beginning to wonder if he was telling the whole truth. It was like I was living in a maze, and every turn just led to more dead ends, more questions, and less clarity. Was Sarah really trying to protect me, or had she been part of something much darker from the start? Was Mark just another pawn in the game, or had he been working with these shadowy figures the whole time? I didn't have the luxury of time to figure it out. Every moment felt like a countdown, and I was running out of people to trust. I had reached out to Sarah's phone a dozen times, but the calls went straight to voicemail, the texts left unread. My gut told me something was wrong, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Everything had changed, and I was teetering on the edge of something I wasn't prepared for, something far bigger than I had ever anticipated. But there was one thing I could no longer ignore, the mysterious messages. One night, as I sat in the dim glow of my phone screen, scrolling through the endless cryptic texts, another message arrived. It was different than the others. No ominous threats, no vague warnings, but a clear and direct message that made my blood run cold. You're not the only one who's searching for answers. If you want to find Jessica, you need to meet us. The message was signed simply, The Watchers. I didn't know whether to feel relieved or terrified. Was this a chance to finally find Jessica, to get the answers I had been desperate for? Or was it another trap, another step into the abyss? But my mind was racing, my emotions tangled in a whirlwind of fear and hope. I couldn't afford to back down now, not after everything that had happened. The choice was clear, even though it terrified me. If I didn't meet them, I might never get another shot at finding Jessica. But if I did, if I walked into that meeting, I was stepping into a world of danger, one where I might never come back from. So I did the only thing I could do, I showed up. The meeting place was an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town, the kind of place you would never go unless you were forced to. The air was thick with tension as I approached the entrance, my heart pounding in my chest. I had no idea who these people were or what they wanted, but my gut told me they were connected to everything I had uncovered. The doors creaked open as I stepped inside, the dark shadows stretching out like tendrils, enveloping me as I walked further into the unknown. The room was empty at first, save for a single figure standing in the center. The moment I saw them, I felt my blood freeze. It was Sarah. I stood there, frozen in disbelief, trying to process what I was seeing. Why was she here? How could she be involved with them? My mind scrambled for answers, but Sarah's cold, unreadable expression told me she wasn't here to explain herself. She wasn't here to make things right. She was here to deliver a message, one I wasn't prepared to hear. You should have stayed away, she said quietly, her voice strained, almost mechanical. The words didn't match the person I thought I knew. They were heavy, like they carried the weight of something I couldn't understand. You should have let it go. But now there's no turning back. My heart sank as I tried to piece together what was happening. Sarah, what is this? What are you doing here? What's going on? She shook her head, her eyes distant, as if she were already lost to me. I didn't want to get you involved. I thought I could protect you, but you're too deep now. You've seen too much. I'm sorry. The finality in her words hit harder than anything I'd heard so far. Sarah wasn't just protecting me. She was part of something far darker. And now I was in the same position, trapped in this web with her, whether I liked it or not. But then, just as I was about to say something, the door slammed open, and another figure stepped into the room. This time, I didn't recognize them. The stranger was tall, their features obscured by a dark hood, their presence dominating the room with an eerie sense of authority. They didn't say a word at first, just stepped closer to me, their gaze sharp and calculating. The silence was suffocating, the tension unbearable. I'm here to give you a choice, the stranger finally spoke, their voice deep and menacing, each word dripping with power. You've been looking for answers, but the truth has a price. If you want to know where Jessica is, if you want to finish what you started, you need to make a decision. You can walk away now, and we'll leave you alone. You'll forget everything you've learned, and you'll never hear from us again. Or, you can stay. You can dig deeper, and you can join us, but once you do, there's no turning back. You'll be part of this forever. My stomach twisted in knots. The weight of the decision was crushing. Walk away, let it all go, and live in ignorance, or stay, knowing that I would be stepping into a world I couldn't even begin to understand. What if joining them meant losing my humanity? What if there was no going back from the choices I was about to make? And Sarah. She was standing there, silent, her face unreadable. Was she part of this? Was she warning me, or had she already made her choice, long before I ever arrived? The betrayal stung, but I couldn't afford to focus on that right now. The stranger's eyes locked onto mine, waiting for my answer. The tension was palpable. Like every second I hesitated, I was sinking further into a trap. Choose, the stranger demanded, their tone cold, final. Now. My heart raced, my thoughts spiraling out of control as I tried to grasp the reality of what was happening. What was I willing to risk? What was I willing to lose? And more importantly, who could I trust in a world that seemed to be falling apart with every new revelation? I had to make a choice, and I knew there was no easy way out. There was no escaping the darkness now. The question was, how deep was I willing to go to find the truth? The air in the warehouse felt thick with danger as the stranger's words hung over me like a suffocating weight. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, but I didn't know how much longer I could keep up the pretense of calm. The decision I was being asked to make was no longer about whether I was brave enough to seek out Jessica, it was about whether I could survive the storm that was coming if I made the wrong choice. But just as I was about to speak, just as I was about to take the plunge into whatever world I was now being drawn into, the sound of footsteps echoed through the dark room. His appearance was like a blow to the chest. I stumbled back, shock freezing me in place, my mind racing to piece together how this could be happening. What was my father doing here? How could he be connected to this dark web I had stumbled into? The man who had always been my rock, the person who had raised me, now stood in front of me, his face unreadable, his eyes cold. "Don't look so surprised," he said, his voice flat, emotionless. "You've been looking for answers, And here they are. The words were a punch to the gut. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but my voice caught in my throat. My father. The one person I'd never expected to betray me, to be a part of this nightmare. How long had he been involved? How much had he known? And more importantly, why? Behind him, more figures stepped into the light, each of them familiar in ways that made my blood run cold. There was Ben, an old family friend who had always acted as if he cared for me. Then came Amanda, a woman who worked at the local law firm, who I'd never thought twice about but who had always seemed too perfect, too involved in everything that went right in my life. There was no mistaking it now, these were people I had trusted, people I had looked up to. But the truth was worse than anything I had imagined. You should have stayed away from this, my father said, his voice lowering, almost regretful. It was never supposed to be your fight. It was always bigger than you. Bigger than all of us. I stood there, in the middle of the room, frozen. The weight of his words sank in slowly, one layer of horror after another. The conspiracy I had stumbled into, the one that had seemed like a few missing pieces of a puzzle, was no longer just about Jessica's disappearance. It was about something far bigger. Something that spanned decades, involved more people than I could count, and reached into places I had never imagined. This wasn't a small-town mystery, it was a network, a shadow organization with connections that ran deep. And I had just walked right into the heart of it. I could feel the ground shift beneath me, the realization crushing me like a wave. My father, Ben, Amanda, they were all part of this. They had been working against me the entire time. My search for Jessica, my attempts to uncover the truth, had all been carefully orchestrated to lead me here, to this moment of reckoning. The hidden messages, the mysterious warnings, the betrayals, they were all part of a bigger plan to keep me in the dark, to keep me from ever finding out the truth. And now, I was tangled in a web that was impossible to escape from. You don't understand, my father continued, his voice strained now, like he was trying to convince me of something. This wasn't supposed to be your burden. It's about protecting you, protecting us. You don't get to choose who's involved in this. You never did. I shook my head, disbelief giving way to a growing sense of rage. What the hell is this? Why didn't you just tell me the truth? Why let me walk around thinking I was making a difference? Why didn't you protect me from this? My voice cracked, raw with emotion. My father's face was impassive, but I could see the regret in his eyes, as if he too realized the enormity of the lie he had been living. But it wasn't enough. Nothing could justify what had been happening, nothing could explain why he and these people had chosen to let me be a pawn in their game. A sudden movement to my right caught my attention, and I turned just in time to see Mark. He was standing in the shadows, his face shadowed with guilt and fear. His eyes met mine for a moment, and I saw it, he knew. He knew everything, and he had never told me the truth. He had played his part, fed me bits and pieces, all while pretending to be my ally. I tried to warn you, Mark said, his voice barely a whisper, as if he were speaking to himself more than anyone else. I tried to tell you, but it was too late by the time you figured it out. You're in too deep now. You can't stop this. The words hit me like a slap. Betrayed by him too. Betrayed by everyone I thought I could trust. The anger inside me burned hotter, faster. But it was more than that, it was the crushing weight of realization that I had been used this entire time. I had been just another pawn in their game, and now that I was too close to the truth, they were closing in on me, pushing me to make a choice I didn't want to make. You don't have to do this, son, my father said, stepping closer. Just walk away. Leave it all behind, and we can make this go away. You'll be safe. No one else has to get hurt. His words were hollow. I could see the cracks in his calm facade, the desperation beneath the surface. It was as if he knew what was at stake, but he wasn't willing to risk everything to protect me, not if it meant pulling me deeper into the web. No, I spat the word out, my voice a mixture of anger and defiance. I'm not walking away. Not after everything I've seen. Not after everything I've lost. The stranger, still standing at the edge of the room, finally spoke again, their voice cold and final. You're out of time. You've made your choice. In that moment, it all became clear. The web, the people involved, The manipulation, it was bigger than just my search for Jessica. It was a machine, a network that controlled everything from the shadows. And they had one simple goal: to silence the truth, to keep it buried at all costs. But they underestimated one thing: they had underestimated me. The silence in the warehouse felt like it was pressing down on me, suffocating every breath I took. My father's cold eyes stared at me from across the room, and I could feel the weight of years of lies, betrayals, and secrets crashing down on me. The group standing behind him, the faces of people I thought I knew, only intensified the horror of the moment. This was it. I was standing on the edge, knowing that whatever came next would be the final test. There was no turning back. My heart was pounding in my chest, my hands trembling slightly as I struggled to hold onto the last remnants of my resolve. I had come so far, uncovered so much, and yet I couldn't shake the feeling that the answers I'd been chasing had only led me to this moment, this dangerous, devastating confrontation with everything I had ever known. I had to face it now. There was no running, no more time to second-guess myself. But the question lingered: who could I trust? My father stepped forward, his voice softer now, as though he was trying to pull me back from the brink, trying to lure me into the same twisted world he had been part of for so long. You don't understand, son. This wasn't personal. It was about protecting you. All of you. His voice was filled with desperation, like he truly believed this was the only way. You've seen too much now, and you need to let it go before it consumes you. Walk away, and we'll make sure no one ever knows you were involved. The words should have made sense. They should have sounded comforting, like the offer of safety. But they didn't. They felt like a trap, a lie meant to keep me in the dark, to keep me from uncovering the truth. He wasn't offering me protection, he was offering me silence, and silence meant everything I had learned, everything I had fought for, would be buried forever. I'm not going anywhere, I said, my voice shaking with a mix of anger and defiance. I could feel the weight of the moment, the finality of the decision. You've been lying to me. All of you. Do you think you can stop this? Ben, the family friend, finally spoke, his voice dripping with mockery. You're in too deep, kid. This isn't just about Jessica anymore. It's bigger than that. It's about power, control, things you'll never understand. I shook my head, each word cutting deeper. I understand more than you think. I've seen enough to know what you're all capable of. And I'm not going to let you cover this up. Not after everything. I was aware, as I stood there facing them, of the danger that hung in the air like an electric charge, ready to explode. They weren't just trying to stop me from finding Jessica, they were trying to erase the truth. But there was one thing I hadn't told them yet, one thing that changed everything. In the chaos, in the web of lies and betrayals, I had found the final piece of the puzzle. It had been sitting in front of me the whole time, hidden in plain sight. When I'd gone through Jessica's belongings, there was one thing I hadn't paid attention to: the journal. It wasn't just filled with notes about her life, her thoughts. It had a map. A map that led directly to the heart of the conspiracy. And it wasn't just a location, it was a list of names, names of people who had been involved for years, names I hadn't recognized until now. Among them were Ben, Amanda, even my father. But there was one more name, one that turned everything upside down. Sarah. It all clicked then. Sarah hadn't been trying to protect me. She had been part of it. She had been working with them, maybe even leading them, all along. And the realization hit me harder than anything else Sarah had known. She knew the whole time. I felt the ground beneath me shift as I connected the dots, each revelation pulling me deeper into the nightmare. This wasn't just about Jessica. This wasn't just about finding one missing person. This was about a system, a machine that had been operating in the shadows for years, pulling strings, manipulating lives, erasing people who got too close to the truth. And the most shocking part of it all? I was never meant to find out. I stared at my father, my voice barely a whisper. Where is she? Where is Jessica? His eyes flickered for a brief moment, something shifting behind them. But then, before he could speak, a voice interrupted, one that sent a chill down my spine. It's too late. I turned to see Sarah, stepping out of the shadows, her expression unreadable. She was calm, eerily so, as if everything was already decided. You've made your choice, she said softly, walking towards me like she had all the time in the world. You're part of this too? I demanded, the words laced with disbelief and rage. You were the one who led me here. You've been lying to me this entire time. She stopped in front of me, her eyes never leaving mine. I never lied to you. I told you what you needed to know when you needed to know it. But you were always going to find out. It was inevitable. The problem is, you think you're ready to handle the truth. You think you can stop what's already in motion. The words hit harder than I expected, but they weren't a threat. They were the final confirmation of everything I had suspected. She was in on it. She always had been. And the reason she had stayed so close, so protective, was because she had known I was getting too close to the truth. She was the key to everything. But there was no going back now. I had to know what happened to Jessica. I had to know what this was all about. In that instant, the world around me seemed to blur. Everything I thought I knew, the people I had trusted, the secrets I had uncovered, it all came crashing down. And as Sarah's eyes met mine, there was a shift, a moment of understanding that passed between us. She wasn't just a part of this conspiracy, she was the one pulling the strings. Before I could react, before I could even process what had happened, she raised her hand, signaling to the others. And just like that, the room erupted into chaos. The lights went out, plunging everything into darkness. I heard footsteps, the shuffle of bodies moving in the shadows, but I couldn't see anything. I was lost, disoriented, trapped. My heart raced in my chest as I tried to make sense of what was happening. And then, just as suddenly as it all began, a single beam of light cut through the darkness. I turned to face it, and there, standing in the doorway, was Jessica. The truth, the final twist, hit me like a freight train. Jessica hadn't been missing. She had been there the whole time, watching, waiting. She had been part of the conspiracy, playing her part in this twisted game. And everything I had been told, everything I had believed, had been a lie. Surprised, she asked, her voice cold, distant. You should be. Because you're not just fighting for answers, you're fighting for your life. And with that, everything I thought I knew came crashing down. The silence that followed Jessica's words felt like an eternity. It hung in the air, heavy and suffocating, as the truth settled around me like a shroud. I could hardly comprehend what she had just said. She wasn't just a victim. She wasn't just the missing girl I had spent weeks searching for. Jessica had been playing a role in this nightmare from the very beginning. She had been the one pulling the strings. The one who had orchestrated the entire thing, manipulating me into believing that I was the hero of this story. It felt like the ground beneath me had vanished, like everything I had fought for, everything I had trusted, had been a carefully crafted illusion. But as the initial shock faded, a bitter realization took its place. There was no hero in this story. There was no happy ending. There was only the twisted, unforgiving truth. Jessica stepped closer, her face devoid of emotion, but there was something in her eyes, something unsettling, like a flicker of recognition.